Boost your productivity through system designs. Have you ever wondered why the same teams are always more successful than others when developing software projects and products? What do these teams do that makes them consistently more successful than most other teams? In addition to soft skills and technical skills of the team members, there is another crucial skill that makes the difference, which is the ability to ensure that requirements and solution concepts fit together and are consistently understood by all participants. As simple as this may seem, it is by far the most difficult task. Why is this so difficult? Because, as powerful as human language may be, it is prone to errors and misunderstandings are inevitable. An essential methodology for improving communication is working with system designs. Working with system designs corresponds to a process of converting user requirements into a structured form in which the components of the system and their interaction are visualized. Teams that integrate system designs into everyday life are clearly superior to other teams. Unfortunately, quite a few teams forgo the use of system designs and limit themselves to purely verbal exchange. These teams usually perform less good. What is the problem of purely verbal exchange? All too often the discussion and exchange of information is purely verbal. The requirements are communicated and discussed, followed by the discussion about possible solutions. We think we understand each other, but in reality, individuals' cognitive models are incomplete and inconsistent within the group. And so the purely verbal exchange is concluded under the assumption that we as an individual have a clear understanding of the problem and the solution, and also that there is a consistent collective understanding among the group. As a consequence, the implementation goes through more iterations than necessary because the problem and approaches have to be discussed over and over again. This means that implementation takes much longer and costs more. The consequence of inefficiency is dissatisfaction within the team and management. Those who will be truly productive will try to prevent such a situation by striving to establish a clear common understanding of the problem and the approach to the solution. Here's the crux of the matter. Often, we don't know that we don't know something, and we don't know what others know or don't know. A verbal exchange only helps to a limited extent. System designs serve to establish a clear, shared understanding of the problem and the solution approach. But why is it like that? A clear and common understanding of the problem statement and the solution approach is crucial. We can certainly agree on this quickly. This is simple, but it is not easy. As humans, we want to understand, and our brain rewards us when we conclude that we understand something, even if this is not really the case. It feels good to come to this conclusion. Our brain wants to save energy and prefers shortcuts, which leads us to jump to conclusions and the assumption that we understand whatever needs to be understood. We all fall into this trap. Disillusionment comes later in the form of low productivity and lack of success. Cognitive heuristics, biases, and fallacies are always at work. When describing something we understand to others, it is particularly important to be aware of two biases, the availability heuristic and the curse of knowledge. Curse of knowledge describes the cognitive process in which the sender's brain unconsciously omits information. The sender of the information has a detailed picture of a topic, and the details are taken for granted and trivial. As a result, the sender omits the explanation of the context and also leaves out the supposedly trivial details when describing, and expects that the recipients of the message will still understand what is said. Once we understand something, we presume it to be obvious to everyone. The availability heuristic describes our cognitive process in which the recipient's brain complements the information received. The recipient does not know what information the sender has left out and can only process what is heard. Our brain absorbs what is said and tries to create a consistent cognitive model as quickly as possible. It does this by extracting familiar fragments from the received message and applying them to one's past experiences. Gaps are filled in and inconsistencies are hidden. The mental model only appears to be consistent. If our own mental model seems consistent, then we feel good and we think we understand the situation, which is not necessarily the case. We think we understand each other, but we end up talking past each other. Our judgments are influenced by what springs most easily to our mind. Biases and fallacies are the reason for the most incredible misunderstandings, without anyone noticing. How do system designs help out here? In order to answer the question of how system designs can help, it first helps to further understand how our brain works. When we communicate verbally, we usually proceed logically, articulate our thoughts, and assume that others understand us. The logical formulation of our thoughts is the responsibility of the left hemisphere of the brain. The left hemisphere of the brain is responsible for logic, scientific procedures, the sense of time and language. The right hemisphere is responsible for holistic and visual thinking and is activated as soon as we begin to write down and visualize our thoughts. The right hemisphere of the brain is responsible for creativity, visual representation, intuition, and imagination. And what does this have to do with system designs? A common understanding requires a common frame of reference. Everyone is used to using their own frame of reference and symbols when sending and receiving messages. These vary greatly depending on culture, individual preferences, type of person, and experiences. System designs serve as a reference system and help to avoid misunderstandings and create clarity. A two-stage synchronization occurs through the visual representation and the creation of a system design. In the first stage, the two hemispheres of a single person's brain are synchronized. This forces the person to question and verify their own understanding. If we cannot write down or visualize our thoughts in a structured manner, we know that we do not understand the underlying problem or do not have a coherent solution to the problem. Writing down and visualizing helps to identify your own gaps in understanding and address the process of closing these gaps. The transmission of information then takes place not only verbally but also visually and triggers the second stage of synchronization. In the second stage, the mental models of the discussion participants are synchronized. Diagrams are used to synchronize the cognitive images of the discussion participants. The recipients now process the information verbally as well as visually. This synchronizes the individual internal mental models and massively increases the likelihood of a truly shared understanding. The recipients can compare their own visual model with the sender's visual model. As information recipients, we intuitively recognize where the availability heuristic came into play and where we subsequently incorrectly completed the received information. The inconsistencies become visible. Specific questions can then be asked in order to close any remaining information gaps that arose as a result of the heuristic curse of knowledge unconsciously applied by the sender. If our mental models are wrong or inconsistent, there is no way we can build the right mechanisms. We need to keep cognitive heuristics in mind and admit that we often talk past each other. System designs address exactly this aspect. They help synchronize our mental models and create shared understanding, which is fundamental to success. With this in mind, start designing and enjoy the success.